Hey everyone, welcome back. So previously, we talked about how to create a verbatim object in LaTeX so that you can get your Python code printed and rendered in the PDF document directly without triggering any errors. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about table object. So for table object, it's the same thing as what we've been talking about above, just like figures and just like equations. You need to physically create a table object. So you start by saying begin table. So this will pop out a template. You can, of course, use a template as it is. So for me, I typically like HT, so that means float. If it's centering, no problem. I like my table to be in the center. And then you can type out the content in the tabular object. So as you see here in the middle of this table object, there is another object, right? Because we say begin tabular and tabular. So this tabular object follows the same rules and same principles as the table in HTML programming language, meaning that we start by defining the columns. So if I put in one letter C, that means one column. If I put in two letters C, that means two columns. And since I have two columns, I can then separate what I need to do in each row with an and symbol. So let's retype that as a new line, just like that. Maybe here we can say value 1 and value 2. Once I finish this row, I need to give 2 slashes to make sure that this row is finished. So this tabular object will have one row because there's one line of value 1, value 2 before the slashes, and two columns because I have two letter C's here. Of course, captions, I can say title and then description. This is the usual drill for me to write out caption of a certain object. So same thing here. In the end, don't forget the label. So label here, since this is a table object, we index as TAB, and then whatever name, then type out whatever name you want. For example, we can say table_1. If I render this, no problem, it will give me a small table. Boom, just like that. Now, of course, this is quite ugly. It does not quite look like a table, even though we have a table object, because these things in here is just one row. So let's get a couple more rows in here by copy and paste, and then you can add a couple of lines. So my favorite is H line, and then I can do that multiple times, just like that. I can even do that twice in the middle, just to give it 2 lines and it'll be a little bit more dynamic. Boom, look like that. As you can see here, now I can change this to column 1 and then change this to column 2. I render again. This will now look more like a table. And then common practice, we can move the caption to the top of the table and the caption will go on top. So now this looks slightly prettier. Now, of course, we can finish that with a highline in the bottom of the tabular object, and we'll add a line down here. So that's a simple table object that I typically see people do. I personally will do that as well. So for example, you can be a little bit more interesting, right? You can say I have 3 columns. Maybe here I have third column 3. And then if you have column 3, obviously you have value 3, right? Just like that. And you can kind of think about this as model and then 2 performances, right? So for example, I can get rid of this. I can say this is model 1, and then this is model 2. And then the value 1 here, maybe it's a role name, right? Maybe I say actors. And then the accuracy for model 1, maybe it's 90%. And then accuracy for model 2, maybe it's 80%. Now we have a problem. You see that this turned into another color. This is because it's trying to render this, but it doesn't quite know what this is, because the percentage sign in LaTeX also means comment out. So it's actually not going to run anything behind that symbol. So to tell LaTeX that I want a percentage symbol, not to use percentage to comment things out, I need to add a slash in front of it. Boom, just like that. Do the same thing with 80% because the percent is an actual symbol. This will work. It will then give me the actual percentage sign behind the numbers, 90%, 80%, and maybe that's the performance of the model. And what kind of performance are we measuring? We're measuring accuracy. So now this is much clearer and it's visually appealing. So typically when I want to summarize model performance, I will use this kind of framework. Now, of course, you can then be a little bit more interesting, right? You can have multi-columns. So to have multi-columns, one thing you want to understand is that what columns are you combining? So that will be the key here, right? Like, for example, let's say I want to combine these two columns. So the way to do that is to use this syntax called multi-column. And then the first curly bracket, you want to use 2 because you are combining the 2 columns into 1, right? If you're combining 3 columns into 1, obviously you use 3. And then we need to keep a second curly bracket. This means alignment. Let's say I want to put that in the center. So I say letter C to put that in the center. And then there's a third curly bracket to finish up this function, which is to give a name, right? There's something going into this multi-column, and that something is a name, a model, performance, right? Whatever you want. So I'll say column name. So this will be able to combine the 2 columns into 1, just like that. So once I tell you that this is the syntax in LaTeX to create multi-column, you might have another intuition, right? What about multi-rows? And that's exactly correct. So you can actually use similar strategy to do multi-rows. For example, I can give you another syntax step here that says multi-row. If you run this, actually, you're not going to get what you want, right? This kind of look weird, right? And then you get a something that's an error message here. And then if you go to the logs, it will actually say, hey, look, you know, something here at the end of a line that was never defined. So what this means is you actually need a package to call this function, right? Whatever this function is, multi-row, on line 155, there's a problem. It was never defined. And it's always fascinating to me that why would LaTeX define multi-column but never define multi-row, right? So that was always fascinating to me. I actually don't know the answer to that question. So for those of you who are watching, if you know the answer to that question, feel free to drop a link in a comment. So it actually also give you this nice recommendations, right? Say, hey, you know, dude, is package missing or what, right? That's correct. That's exactly what we need. So use package multi-row. That's what we need to copy. We need to go to the top of the document and simply drop that line here as a new package to import. So that's right. It exactly works same way as Python or whatever other language that you're using. If you're going to use a function not built in, right? If you're going to use a function that's not built in, that's coming from another package, well, you got to call that package, right? So same way here. Now, let's go back to the spot. Let's render this again. This time we'll be able to see this function work out perfectly well. There you go. The error is gone from the logs. And then in the table 2, you will see that multi-row is now taking the spot of 2 rows. So there you go. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like.